Wonderfully caught by Jonty Rhodes. That's as good as you're going to see all season. What a catch.
How do you prepare yourself to deliver on the day you're very unmotivated?
You can't have a great player or a leader who only performs when conditions are great. And I think that the key there is when, the real greatness comes when you're not feeling like you're hitting the ball in the middle. We were still achieving something for the team, no matter what it looked like. Practice makes perfect is half the story. It's perfect practice.
When you visited Hansi Kronia's house, what was the thing that was circled which he never told you, but was circled and which defined his leadership?
Then there was one quote that I'd never heard him say ever, and it literally summed up his captaincy. And he just said, if things went bad, I did it. If things went okay, we did it. But if things went well, you did it. So that's how you get teams to win games for you as a coach.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Inside the Mind of a Leader. Everybody knows him. He needs no introduction. But Mr. Jonty Rhodes, he created leadership in an area which many people didn't even think about when they were thinking about cricket. When they thought they either wanted to be a batsman, they wanted to be a bowler. And he created leadership. And I was talking to him earlier, and it was fascinating about how fielding was equated to team building, whereby fielding, when you save runs, you help bowler improve their economy, you put extra pressure on the batsman. And that's kind of what leadership is about, right? So, Jonty, welcome.
Thank you.
The theme for today is preparation over talent.
Okay.
So my first question to you is, you started at a very young age. We got to know about your early childhood. You pursued cricket and hockey simultaneously. Then cricket chose you versus the other way out. But it's been a long journey, right? And journey for a sportsman typically is about 10, 15 years, and then they find new ways to reinvent yourself. So my question is, what really drives you even today?
I think the fact that I realize that I really am an unfinished product, and that every day there's something to learn, and that teaching can come from everywhere. And I think a big part of that is, in a cricketing environment as a coach and as part of the management, especially in India, where there's so much respect, in fact, sometimes too much respect from the younger players, that they don't voice their opinion, or they kind of tell you what they think you want to hear. And, communication is obviously such an important part of instilling trust and part of the team culture. But communication is not just about, clarity of role and responsibility and being a good someone good with words and allowing people to understand that role. Good communication also requires active listening, and that's amazing, because I'll often speak or coach young kids, young Indian players, and I'll ask them, do you understand what I'm saying? And they, yes, Jonty. But I look at their body language is telling me totally, what does this guy want from me? I mean, it's like he's asking for the impossible. So that for me has always been such a good thing, is that what I've learned as a cricket player is that, you really need that sort of active listening. And it's just about giving people respect, even if for 3 minutes. If they're talking to you for 3 minutes, give them your wholehearted attention.
Wow.
And you can learn from everybody. I started as a fielding coach, and I'd never been coached before as a fielder.
Yes.
So I had to learn.
I don't even play. It was
No,
fielding coaching
it
at that
wasn't.
time.
I mean, Curran Pollard taught me about the boundary riding. I mean, he was the first guy to take those amazing saves on the boundary, pull the ball back in, because he was like an NBA basketball player. I mean, he's 6'4". He's such a great athlete, long arms, big hands, and he can hold the ball, one hand. And I just picked up from what he was doing on the boundary. So, I'm always open to learn. And I think that's such an important part of what drives me every day, is that the understanding is that I'm far from the finished product.
Where do you strike a balance between recognizing what you need to improve upon, but then also accepting your strengths and weaknesses?
Well, I think a big part of our focus as the human race is always, and especially in corporate environment, is fixing your weaknesses. And I think we should have an opportunity, and especially in an environment where you've got a team around you, people with unique skills. And that's what I love about cricket. I mean, everybody is unique. Their perspective, the way they train, the way they hit a ball, the way they bowl a ball. And we use that unique skill set and don't try and, assimilate it.
Don't
Okay,
try
this is
to-
one. This is
Don't try to fix Jasprit
no,
Bumrah.
you didn't have or Malinga. I mean, even Malinga, so you kind of look at that and you go, well, fair enough. I mean, even Bob Wilmer, when he was coaching me, instead of trying to get me hit over extra cover, he said, Jonty, what about the reverse sweep? Because you're such a hockey player. You sweep well, you pull well, but the reverse sweep is
Did you
something.
start doing reverse sweep before
Yeah.
you knew?
Yeah. So I was the first guy apparently to hit a reverse sweep for 6 because he was saying, because he had coached Warwickshire in the county cricket, and Dermot Reeve, who was captain in Warwickshire, he would play the reverse paddle, which he put his bat down the wicket and allow the ball to run, but just go on the ground.
Right.
So never a hit. And Bob was also a hockey player in his day, Bob Wilmer, and he just said, with your wrists and your low center of gravity and your fast feet, you can change. Because Kevin Peterson then brought the switch hit, which he actually changed his hands around. Whereas for me, my hands were still a right-handed batter. And, I don't think we have to reinvent ourselves every day, but I think we also have to understand that there's constant evolution. And if it's not on your desk, it's on your client's desk, it's on your staff's desk, it's everywhere. And it's not just about, reinventing yourself for the sake of it. I think if I'm always of the understanding is that if you can put your ego aside, make a few mistakes, become a beginner again, all the experience that you have from your previous role or the way you did things is going to allow you to move forward at speed. But just, you don't have to unlearn. We always talk about you've got to unlearn things to get. Sometimes it's just about accepting the fact that you're going to make a few mistakes. And that's sometimes the biggest thing, our ego that gets in the way of that. And, it's a constant journey. We are never completed.
Awesome. We are rolling this session after we had a great chance to hear Jonty on another session, and he spoke about the long, preparation that it took to get that 2-second split decision where you jumped and broke the stumps and ran Inzamam out in the 1992 World Cup. So my question with that is, using that as an instance, preparation over talent. What is the hard work that needs to be put in? What do you need to do on a daily basis, and how important it is for a leader to be ready to take those tough decisions when the moment arrives?
I think, the question about, firstly, preparation over talent is that people, we often get asked as coaches, what would you rather coach, someone with discipline or somebody with talent? And to be honest, it's actually a combination of both, because if you're just a disciplined person, the opposition can work you out quickly. Your skill set that the cricketers have these days, if you're good in because you're disciplined without the sort of flair and the talent that comes with a lot of the players these days, people can work you out quite quickly. If not get you out, they can contain you. And in T20 cricket, that's as bad as as losing your wicket. In fact, it puts more pressure on your teammates. So I think from that point of view, but if you have all the talent in the world without the discipline, you might win a game for the team, but you're not going to win consistently over a season. And IPL these days it's 10 weeks. So it's a lot of games that are being played, and you don't want a guy to just perform once. And that's often the talented players who haven't put in the hard yards and done the disciplined work, because I think from a perspective of when you're under pressure, you don't rise to your potential. You kind of always just step back to your preparation. And if the preparation isn't solid and it's around the basics and doing those really well, you can be a flame the one day, a star one day, and then just fizzle out for the rest of the season. So from that point of view, talent versus preparation, it's definitely a combination of.
And in India, we often use the example of Sachin Tendulkar and Vinod Kambli. Many say Vinod Kambli was far more talented, but Sachin Tendulkar had strong work ethics. He did not take his talent lightly. I mean, both were talented, but when you combine talent with work ethic,
I've got a great, obviously worked a lot with Sachin, and then Vinod Kambli actually came out and played in South Africa. Was it in the leagues in South Africa? He played for Paul, and such a talented batter. I mean, I know they had that incredible record as schoolboys, but the amazing thing about Sachin at the end of his international successful career, played for Mumbai Indians, and not always in his element. I mean, he's not a basher of the ball, but he used the pace well. He just straight bat, hit through the covers, played good cricket shots. And it was fascinating because the one day we were preparing for RCB, at the Wankhede Stadium. You know, across India, there's black soil, red soil, and the orange soil, the red soil that they have is more at Wankhede, is more pace and bounce. And RCB had just signed Dale State. And Sachin was just, called me over, you know, for my fielding practice before he even batted in the nets. In fact, in the preparation, he didn't even face any bowling in the nets. And he asked me to bring my racket and tennis balls. What does he want? Because I am a tennis player, and or used to play tennis, and I use the racket a lot.
What do you not play?
Yeah, rugby. I actually had epilepsy as a young boy, mild form, so I couldn't play physical head contact. Okay. But Sachin wanted me to serve the ball at him, so it bounced, and with the tennis ball bounce from 18 yards would come past his chin. And his whole purpose for doing that was that he just said, you know, Jonty, in Dale Steyn can't bowl bounces. He can bowl one ball that's shoulder length, but only one ball every over. And the natural instinct from an Indian player, because we only play on lower bouncing wickets, we see the ball and we almost defend our face with our gloves, with our hands. And then it means the ball hits there and it balloons somewhere.
Anywhere.
And it's only one ball. I've just got to make sure that I get in the habit of putting my hands down and letting the ball go past. And he said, I can't practice the cricket ball because I might get hit. You know, I've got a game tomorrow, so please just serve. So for 20 minutes, I just served balls that he didn't hit. He went from here to here, just getting his hands down. And he has a guy who has the most impeccable international career. He's got 100 hundreds already. And he is training specifically to face what he's going to face the next day. So that, you know, that attention to detail. So yes, he was a talented player, and Vinod Kambli apparently really, really way more talented. But Sachin, with the discipline and the talent that he had, no surprising that he went so far.
But, you know, just building up on that, Tendulkar knew Dale Steyn is going to bowl him tomorrow. Pitch is going to be red soil, bounce. For a corporate leader, they don't know what will happen tomorrow.
For sure.
So how do they prepare for something that they don't even know what will happen tomorrow? And the team will still expect them to take a decision.
You know, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, when I dived into the stumps, I'd never practiced that, and I never did it again. But at the time, I spent my life diving around. You know, so my fielding was about doing something slightly different, taking a chance, taking risk. You know, making a decision to go for the ball, even if I dropped it or missed it because it was at the end of my reach. And the same thing, running towards the wickets. I knew that I didn't back my accuracy. I backed my speed more. So, you know, my strength and my skill set was around being a good diver and saver of the ball, and I had good speed. But the accuracy component was lacking because we didn't really practice that part of fielding. And I wasn't confident. So when I ran towards the stumps, Inzamam was coming back faster than I anticipated. So for me, it was just to dive those last 2 meters. And I'd never done, it was the right thing to do because instinctively, my body said, do this, and my brain said, do this, and my body responded. I didn't question it or query it. What are you talking about? I've never done this. Back myself. So you can't predict every environment or every scenario. There's no way. So I think from a point of view where you're looking in a corporate environment, yes, we need speed. We need to be able to make the decision. So one, I wasn't scared of failure, you know, because if you're going to fail fast and learn from it and move on. But the second thing was that, you know, I had already the structure of being a great fielder. Not that anybody had ever seen me. You know, I was at school cricket, at state cricket. Everyone was talking about me as a fielder, but no one had ever really seen it. So my whole sort of presence in the field was all about taking risk, doing things, but practicing that, you know, and not practicing diving into the stumps, but just practicing throwing myself around. So it felt totally natural. When my brain said, you got to dive, I didn't question it or query it.
Because you question yourself.
It would have been the split second and he would have been home.
He would have been home. So, Jonty, you often joke about that you were probably not the best batsman and you made fielding your skill set and that allowed you to play so many matches. But at what stage did you realize that it cannot be just about, you know, talent, that, you know, to succeed at the highest level, you know, to be world class, you need something deeper. Like, did that shift happen during school days or when you got exposed to the world, the international cricket?
No, the shift actually happened halfway through my international career. And I'll tell you, halfway through. And because I think because I was contributing in the field, there was less pressure on me. I mean, there should have been more pressure on me to score. My job was to bat. You know, I was there to score runs, and I was kind of averaging 27, 28, saving 20 in a game. People say, oh, but you're averaging 40, 50. You're fine. You're doing a great job. And the one moment that the penny dropped for me, and I kind of reinvented myself, was at the 1999 World Cup semi-final.
England.
Everyone talks about Alan Donald dropping his bat, Lance Klusener.
Everybody talks about Herschel.
I mean, yeah, Steve Waugh. That actually never got said. There was urban legend, but yes, exactly that. Had Australia lost the game, they actually would have been exited from the tournament. But the amazing thing was that at that stage, Lance Klusener was the man of the tournament. He was in incredible form. But we had some great all-rounders, and Jacques Callis batted ahead of me. I batted number 6. And then we had Sean Pollock, Lance Klusener, Mark Boucher, great hitters of the ball. And so in that era, I was kind of feeling like I've got to get to 30 or 40, but now there's 10 overs left, and I've got Klusener, Pollock, Boucher. I've got to hit the ball. And that wasn't my game. I mean, I hit the bad ball for boundaries, but I would run, and if Klusener was batting, he could hit the ball to long off, and I'd be there and back in a flash, and he would be back on strike. And it was interesting because people asked me, when Alan Donald dropped his bat, what did you say to him? And I just remember saying, I actually apologized to him. His job was to bowl the team out, and he'd done that. He had bowled Australia out. They only scored 211 or 12, and I was 40 odd, and I got out, caught in the boundary.
Yes.
And I didn't finish the game because I was thinking I've got, not that. That was kind of my mindset, is that once I get to 30 or 40, there's usually only 10 overs left, and I've got to start hitting. I've got to change the way I'm playing because I've got these big hitters after me. And the whole thing flipped on its head for me was that, you always got to put your ego aside and go, what is good for the team? The team needs me to be there at the end. And I became the finisher. Michael Bevan was doing it for Australia.
Yes.
Not because he was a good hitter.
And Virat Kohli did it for India.
But-
and he had the same handicap as you did. He was not as big a hitter as people who were coming after
running
him.
between the wickets.
Was running between the
Michael
wickets.
Bevan, I mean, I thought I was quick. That guy was incredible, like lightning. And it was just I think Dhoni's probably got, there's a weird stat. You have the person with the most not outs in a winning cause. So someone who's batted their team to the end. And Dhoni is head and shoulders, and myself and Michael Bevan, I think, are in there. And that became my job because, Alan Donald, everyone criticized for dropping his bat, but I was the guy, that was my job, was to score the runs. And I then I said to myself, I need to be the finisher for the team. So I'm not going to worry about the boundaries. I'm looking to be not out at the end of the game. Because if I'm not out, no matter if Klusener and Pollock are batting, I'm going to add to them. And if only one of them has to come into bat, I'm going to, again, complement their style of batting by being fast between the wickets, getting them back on strike, and not putting them under pressure by losing another wicket.
That's very good. Now, people often say confidence comes from the ability. For you, did it come from the ability or the preparation?
That is a good question, because I'd have to say the preparation mainly, because the only time I didn't feel confident was when I got to the crease and the match situation wasn't the same as my preparation. So, what puts you under pressure is kind of the ambiguity or the unknown and the stress that you get from not having a clear picture of where you want to go or what you want to do, the decisions that you want to make. And facing those sort of bowlers for me, Murali, Wasim Akram, Shoaib Akhtar, was just because I wasn't 100% sure of what my process had been and how to counter what they were going to bowl. Because when you get a good sighting of the ball, you stick and you trust your process. Whereas now it's a lot more guesswork comes in, and you weren't as confident, and you certainly felt it facing that type of bowler.
So it comes from preparation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, perfect. And how do you prepare yourself to deliver on the day you're very unmotivated?
Because I think good teams, good players, you'll see them deliver when conditions are great.
Right.
When they're on top and
They feel good and everything.
I mean, poor old Graham Hick used to play, and people would call him a flat track bully. I mean, he was a really talented player.
Yes.
But he had that reputation of being somebody who destroyed county cricket, and then on day 3 of a test match when nothing was happening, and I think horribly so, that was the
But Ashes record was very bad.
and that's why they said that. So from a point of view where you can't have a great player or a leader who only performs when conditions are great. And I think that the key there is when, the real greatness comes when you're not feeling like you're hitting the ball in the middle. Can you weather that storm or weather that patch of feeling terrible and know it looks... I mean, I was once described as somebody trying to catch confetti in a swirling wind with a bucket. And they probably were right. So I didn't hold him. I can't think who the commentator was. It stuck with me forever. And I remember, like, because I was sweeping and reverse sweeping, and
Not Jeffrey Boycott?
no, definitely wasn't Jeffrey. He would have been far more critical than that. And it's that, from a leader, from a player, is that understanding that you might get one day out of 100 where everything is just clicks into place, and it just feels like time slows down and you're in the zone. Whereas as a player, you most of the days you struggle through, and then maybe because even your innings could fluctuate. You could struggle up front and then have a great session in the middle, and then suddenly the ball gets older or the wicket gets slower, and it starts getting more difficult. You almost got to readjust your game. So getting in and understanding that you can't wait for conditions.
But how do you focus when things are not going your way? Because it's easiest to get out and go back to the dressing room.
I think the key there is that you need to understand the contribution you're making to your team. Because if I get out now, when suddenly from over 10 to over 25, when it was easy batting and I've been batting, now suddenly it gets slower. And if I get out, my teammate who comes in is going to struggle even more because he hasn't been around, and he's now got to adjust to a slower wicket. And if I just get irritated and say, oh, let me just play a big shot, and I now put him under more pressure and the whole team under pressure. And I think that was always the key for us in the tough scenarios where things weren't going great, or just understanding that we were still achieving something for the team. No matter what it looked like, catching confetti in the buckets, I was still playing a role that was helping my team. And that for us was always the driving factor. If you can create that sort of team culture where, and I think that's a great side, it's more than the individual. It's about what are you doing. So can you sacrifice an individual for the team, or can that individual make sacrifices that don't benefit him but actually are for the benefit of the team? I think that the key though, Ankur, is that if it's tough for you, imagine how tough it's going to be for the other people.
There you go.
And that's what you got to remember. You have the experience. That's why you are the leader. That's why you are the guy in that position. You have the experience.
Beautiful.
You have the ability to adapt and to take it on the chin and knuckle down and just grind through it. But if you then walk away and leave it to somebody else, that's abdicating your responsibility.
No, I think that's beautiful. I think if it's a summation of what leadership is, showing up on tough days.
Yeah.
Easy days are okay. Anybody. And there's a famous saying you were telling us about that when you visited Hansi Cronier's house. What was the thing that was circled which he never told you, but was circled and which defined his leadership?
Hansi was such a great speaker, and the cricket board often used him at charity functions, at fundraisers, and he literally had about 8 or 9 quotes that he would verbatim. He didn't need any notes, and he would say, this was the quote, and this is how we, or myself as a leader or as a team, this is how we apply it. And then there was one quote when he had died. My wife and I, we flew down. They couldn't get into the mountains because of this massive storm that had been raging. So people had to walk out to try and find the wreck. And we didn't know for 24 hours if he was still alive or not. And when they eventually found the wreckage and brought him back, we stayed in preparation for the funeral. We stayed with his now widow. And my wife stayed with her in their room, and I stayed in their spare room, which is close to his study. And all his books in his study were about success. And so he was a natural born leader. I mean, he really was. From 18, he was captaining the South African school team. Even in isolation, we had a South African side. And he was the captain. I was the vice captain. Even though my team was dominant, we had great players. He had a weaker team, but he was a great leader. And he didn't just rely on his natural ability. He worked at it. So all the books that he had were about success and teamwork and winning. And the quote that, and I remember going through the books and say, I remember this quote and remember that quote. And some of them were highlighted, some were underlined, some were ringed, some had asterisks next to it and little stars. And then there was one quote that I'd never heard him say ever. And it literally summed up his captaincy. And that's why we as a team were the number 1 ranked team in the world at that stage under his captaincy for 4 years, because people were just finding ways to win games for the side. And the quote went, and it was from Bear Bryant, who was the coach of the Green Bay Packers over a very successful 10-year period. And it was a book about winning and team success. And he just said, if things went bad, I did it. If things went okay, we did it. But if things went well, you did it. He said, that's how you get teams to win games for you as a coach. So, you provide them cover when things don't quite go according to plan, which happens often. You give them the cover. You take the heat, But when things go well, you are giving them the priority and the spotlight. And that's summed up without Hansi ever mentioning. I never heard him say anything like that ever in any of his speeches, but that summed up his captaincy, and we really felt it.
This will come or not?
Yes, okay.
So, I never heard that quote before. But at IPV, what we try to do, and CXO as well, is we do these quarterly awards, which are given to the employees, never to the founders.
Yeah.
So our name will never be on that list. Or when we have to announce an exit, like a successful exit, we ask our team to go and announce that, okay, you invested money in this startup has become such a big success. But if the startup goes down, we go and tell our investors this startup has gone down.
Yeah.
Those things we don't leave it to our employees,
Yeah.
because that's failure. So we put in front. So we didn't know about this code, but it looks like secretly we were imbibing that.
But what is amazing, I mean, I always talk about freedom to fail in the field, because you don't want players thinking, I can't dive for the ball because if I drop it or if I miss it, Jonty's going to be upset. I get upset if people stand there and watch the ball go past, because you don't until you go, you don't know. But if you have an environment with psychological safety where every time you fail, there's a post-mortem and what did you do wrong, as opposed to every time there's an outcome, success or failure, what did we learn from that? Because it really is, it's an experience, and you can
People often don't do that.
No, that's a danger for us, as IPL coaches, where in a week you can play 3 games, so you can go from 8th on the log to 2nd on the log. Yes. Within the week, within 5-6 days, 3 matches. And our biggest danger is that you get this winning momentum, and the players forget what they did on the Monday that got them to where they are on the Sunday, and it's because you don't do a reflection on what was the outcome. So what did we learn from today? What can we do better? What can we hold on to? And then what can we do, even if we've won the game, what can we do better in the next game or tomorrow at practice? And that is so important, because if you've got, if you've got a captain that's providing cover for the team by taking the responsibility when things haven't gone their way, and that's where Hansi was so good, when he really was incredible. He would give the opposition credit and praise for their performance as well. He wouldn't make excuses, but he would never say, we didn't score enough runs in the first 10 overs because you're Herschel Gibbs and Gary Gerson trying to survive Brett Lee, just get through with your life intact. And you read about the paper the next day that the captain feels like you didn't score enough runs. He would compliment. And there was a guy who was his athlete. I mean, he used to train with an Olympic 1500 meter runner, Zola Bud, and a running club. And so and it was an amazing thing is that he and I had kind of made a pact with each other, because we were both young and good athletes. We just said, there's no shortcuts. Because our teammates will never keep up with us. So all we did was running for fitness. And it would have been easy for us to cruise because we were always ahead of the pack anyway.
Yeah.
And we just made a pact with, we got to push ourselves and push each other. Because if we cruise and take shortcuts here at practice, it will reflect in the performance. And that's the amazing thing about team culture. It's not what you do, it's what you allow. That's what builds team culture.
Beautiful.
Drags down team culture.
You should patent this. It's not what you do, it's what you allow.
Not mine. It is somebody else. Yeah, I remembered it now. But so spending time.
It's very nice.
So
I'm going to print it.
But and it's interesting because you kind of look back and every team, when you get there, there's the hashtag, it's on the wall, and this is what we do, this is who we are. But if you're not doing it on the field, and if you're allowing things, and again, you're trying to create an environment where everyone's happy, but you still need honest truth and hard truth at times, and that's the culture you need, and often the shortcuts. So I'm a big believer when you do shuttle running, so many players touch short, and you can see they're running with spikes on. So the cone is here, that's where you're supposed to touch down and turn back for the next run. You can see where the spike marks are a foot short of the cone. And that was our pact to each other, Hansi and I, was that we would never take a shortcut at practice. When no one's watching, nobody else was watching, everybody else was taking a shortcut.
Stay true to yourself.
Didn't bother us. It was that we wanted to be the best in the world, and to do that, we had so much to catch up. Was that the small things, if we did that perfectly, those were the basics that we needed to give us an advantage. So never once did we ever cut corners.
I also read somewhere success comes when you do things right when nobody's watching. Everybody will do the right thing, say the right thing when everybody's watching.
Yeah. So I mean, that's an interesting point, because Herschel Gibbs and Herschel was a great fielder, good mover, good rugby player, such a talented batter, naughty as anything, but we loved him. I mean, he was such a good teammate. And once we were both retired, we had been asked by the cricket board to come and coach the academy, the under-19 boys. So about 25 of them at the High Performance Center in Pretoria, and 2-3 coaches of theirs. We all sat in the dressing room, and so it was a weekend of Herschel opening batting, me middle order batting, but focus on fielding. And the coaches kind of told these young boys, because some of them were obviously quite young, and I'd been retired already for a while. This is Jonty, this is his stats, and this is what he did, and for South Africa. And just before we were about to go onto the field, Herschel said, hold on, 1 second. I need to know something about Jonty. Is that you all see what he did and his highlights package on, but his legacy in my mind for our team was the way that he practiced. So Herschel never told me that. And that was something that impacted Herschel. So my legacy within the team wasn't the dives it was just the way that I prepared. And because there was no shortcut. So, and that stemmed out of my father's advice to me, was that practice makes perfect is half the story. It's perfect practice.
Perfect practice.
So rather practice for 10 minutes, high intensity, like it's a match, and then move on. Don't practice for an hour just for the sake of it. It's more about, it's not what is the output. It's what is the outcome.
We call it the face time.
Yeah, for sure.
Just sitting in the office.
Just being there.
It doesn't matter. Results matter.
Yeah.
So if you achieve your results in 10 minutes, enjoy the
rest of it. Yeah.
Right? But people often mistake face time for success.
Yes.
And I think, and as a parting shot, any message you have for our young leaders, our young, aspiring leaders, people who are going through the curve, any parting message for them?
Well, I mean, there's no path that's going to be faultless ever. I mean, you're going to stumble, you're going to make mistakes, but it's always been, my view that what have you learned? And again, if you're going to fail, because I'm a bit of a procrastinator, I really am. So
you are.
I put things on. I really am. On the cricket field, no, but everything else, because I don't want to upset people. So I'm a bit of a people pleaser, and because of that, I actually don't. I hesitate to take the first step. So don't procrastinate, because I've learned now that when you take that risk or you step out, and even if you fail, you've learned something, because not making a decision is still making a decision, right? I mean, it's making a decision not to make.
If you don't take decisions, then others will take it for you.
So that's a massive thing. It's such a courageous move that you're doing, that once you're in, go all in.
Awesome. No, this is great, Jonty. I think it's not just corporate people. I think young kids, everybody will learn a lot from this. So thank you for your time. Thank you for having me.